So good morning, everybody. My name is Jenna Webb, and I serve as the One Georgia Authority Director. And Samantha, our friend who is on our housing side, is going to be tag teaming this presentation with us so we can talk a little bit about our new Georgia Rural Workforce Housing Initiative that was created this past year in the fiscal year amended 23 budget. So it's a really exciting time for us to make a big difference for rural workforce housing across the state of Georgia, especially in our rural areas. So we're going to talk today about meeting the housing needs in the growing rural areas of Georgia. So Samantha, do you want to say anything to welcome?
Yeah, thank you, everyone who's here. You all are the first group of people to see this presentation for this brand new program. So pat yourself on the back for being the first people to hear about this. We're very excited to be rolling out this program. I work for the GCA Office of Housing Finance, and we primarily focus on financing for affordable housing construction. But with this program, we're going to be able to provide housing construction assistance and land development for people who are not within that low income range. And so for us, it's an exciting opportunity for us to branch out and do more with our communities. I just have one thing I want to share before we get started to kind of set the context for why this program is so important. I recently was presenting on this on Friday with the Georgia Economic Development, and what I did some research to sort of lay the foundation for this housing situation that we're finding ourselves in. I'm sure you all are familiar of how expensive it's getting and how hard it is for people to find housing, whether they're renters or owners, low income, upper income, what have you. And the number of houses we are short right now, well, let me just back up and say, before the 2008 housing crisis, we were building houses for the amount of people we had. It's kind of on pace as Georgia's population grew, the number of houses kind of matched that. And then in 2008, when the housing crisis happened, the housing production numbers went off a cliff and nothing was being built. And then we've been slowly building back up again. But in order to meet the current demand, because Georgia's growing, we're really excited that people want to live here. We need to make up about 118,000 homes to meet the current demand. So that is quite a lot of people who need housing, who are maybe doubled up or otherwise renting when they could be owning and other things. So that's why it's really important for the government to step in right now and try to figure out ways that we can make up that gap. I'll go ahead and advance the slides, Jenna. Just let me know when you want me to go next, okay?
All right.
And in keeping with that theme of trying to meet housing demands, the Georgia government's really making a big jump forward in investing. Jenna, do you want to take this slide?
Sure. So Governor Kemp, he shared in his State of the State address back in January, he said, as we grow business opportunities across the state, affordable housing for our workforce will continue to be a growing need. As Samantha just said, we have a major need across the state. We've had some large economic development announcements that have occurred in different areas of our state. And now it's where do we put these people that are going to come in and live? So we've got to work as the government alongside our communities that are ready for this growth to be able to provide that workforce housing, which is the area where we just always have a huge gap and a need there. So Governor Kemp placed this in his State of the State of address. That's where he created a budget code for this rural workforce housing initiative through the One Georgia Authority. And so we have taken this, and since January, we've been working with the governor's office on this and our team at DCA, so that the One Georgia Authority can be the conduit for these funds, so that we make sure that it does get to the rural parts of Georgia, that we're not just, providing that housing in the Metro Atlanta area, because the Metro Atlanta area is not even eligible for funding through the One Georgia Authority. So this really is geared to the rural parts of Georgia, focusing on a lot of those large announcements we had, but also other announcements that aren't quite as large, but there's a need in those communities. So we decided as a One Georgia Authority board to create a subset program of our initial program of equity so that we could get these funds out a lot quicker. If we had created a whole new program, it might have been October, November, December before we started making awards. But with us creating this as a subset of our equity program is just an initiative underneath there. It allows us to get the funds out to our communities in a much quicker manner. So we're in the process of having our equity rules be amended as we speak. That should be voted on in June. So we are preparing to start looking at accepting applications as early as July and making awards in September. So we're trying to roll this out as quick as possible. So you can go ahead and go to the next slide.
Yeah, and I just admitted a couple new people, so let's lay a couple ground rules here. Y'all are welcome to add comments in the chat just throughout this as you think about it. We also will have time at the end for questions, so we can have some discussion about it. I'm sure we'll have probably, I don't know how long this presentation is going to go, but we definitely wanted to make sure there was time for questions. Is there anything other things you want to say about the presentation, Jenna?
I'll just say that we specifically geared regions across the state together. So the reason why y'all are combined as 4, 6, and 7 is because you have communities that are very similar. So there was thought process about which communities and which regions we put together, because we want to make sure that when we're getting to the question and answer portion at the end of this, that it's really pertaining to the communities that we're touching that day. So we feel like that y'all will have some similarities across your regions. So, but if you have people that can't participate or, want to participate but couldn't, we will, like Sam said, we will have this available on our website, on our DCA YouTube channel the next coming days. So you'll be able to share that link with them. So.
Yeah. And at the end, I'm going to say now in case I forget, but at the end of this, I'll send everyone a survey, those people who registered, and you all will get one. So you can fill it out and let us know where once you get this information, how you think it might apply in your community so we can start talking to you and having those conversations. Okay, let's get into it.
All right. So in the amended FY23 budget, One Georgia Authority was given $35.7 million to focus on this rural workforce housing initiative. So as a team, we have gotten together and we have decided to split those funds with $25.7 million going towards infrastructure grants across the state, and then $10 million that Sam's team will work on with the construction financing and lending piece of that. So the One Georgia Authority will administer the 25.7 with DCA's Housing and Finance Division administering the 10 million piece. Out of the 25.7, we will be providing grants to communities, development authorities, cities, or the counties have to be the applicant. And those will be focused on land development. So any infrastructure needs, roads, water, sewer. If land acquisition is an eligible activity, we would like to focus more on the infrastructure piece of that because of holding title to land and getting into a little bit deeper on that. So we really want to focus on being able to, if land's already been acquired, putting the infrastructures there that are needed for that housing. So like I said, water, sewer, roads is what we're really wanting to focus on. And on the housing finance division side of it, that will be loans that we working with communities, applications with the lenders and the builders on that. So Sam, I'll let you add to that piece.
Yeah, and let me just add a little bit to this. So while the grant for land development here is to, let me see who that is, mute them. I'm not seeing who that is. You got it? Okay. So the intent is for you all to decide, the variety of housing you want to do. For the construction loans, we're really focusing on home buyers right now. We have a lot of loan and grant products at the Housing Finance Division to do multifamily rental, to do senior rental, to do owner-occupied rehab. There's a variety of different programs we have. What we want to do with this $10 million is focus on starter homes for middle-income people, and we're doing it as a loan, primarily because we can't give grants to companies that are building housing, but also we are only going to be providing 40% of the financing. So we're going to try to see if we can, with our money, lower the construction costs and provide some easy access to financing to try to build as many houses as we can. And then we expect those loans to be repaid so we can put them back out again. So that's kind of the main distinction between those two sources of funding and how we're breaking it down. And also I wanted to say you can apply for both. So your community can go after the grants. You can also partner with a developer and access the loan funds, and then, or you could do one or the other. Okay, do you want me to go to the next slide?
Yes, please.
Yeah.
So here's a map that I mentioned earlier of the One Georgia eligible counties. So in the dark green, we refer to those as our eligible. The lighter green are conditionally eligible. So they need to be adjacent to an eligible community that will write a letter of support for them in their application. The counties that are in the gray area are not eligible to receive any One Georgia Authority funding. So those 8 or 9 counties that are right there in the metro Atlanta area, they're not allowed to receive the funding for this rural workforce housing initiative, because the goal is really to help this across rural Georgia, not in the metro area. So go to the next one, Sam. So as I mentioned earlier, on the infrastructure grant side of it, we are capping the amount that you can request at $2.5 million. So that's much larger than our typical equity application cap, but we are allowing you to apply for up to $2.5 million for infrastructure grants. There is no match that is required, but leverage resources will improve the application competitiveness. Each application will go through a scoring mechanism. You can find that on the One Georgia Authority site through the DCA site. There's a scoring sheet available there along with our applications. So you can see exactly how we're going to be scoring these internally as a team. Every application that we look at it on an individual basis. So we're not competing one application to the next per se, but we don't typically have a lot of applications that get funded when they come in asking for the full amount of the project in a grant. When we take this to the One Georgia Authority Board, every time we meet, it's what is the local contribution to the project? There isn't an exact formula. We don't say you need to contribute a certain amount to it because each county is going to be able to do something different, right? Some larger counties can do more than our smaller counties, but we will be looking at that when we're looking at scoring these applications. We will not accept an application that is under the amount of $250,000. So we're looking for anywhere from 250 to 2.5 million. We're looking at the infrastructure piece of it. So Sam, I'll let you talk about the housing loan piece of that.
Yeah, sure. We're getting a couple questions too about the definition of workforce housing, which I'm not sure if we have that specifically on the slides.
It is in the slides. Yeah, we'll get to
great.
that.
So we'll get to that when we get to that. All right. So for the funding requirements for the loan, the maximum loan amount that you can apply for is $1 million. And that is to provide up to 40% of the project financing. So we're talking about a larger project budget, and we're providing 40%, and the most we'll do for any one deal is $1 million. And then the 60% of the financing has to come from other sources. We're following a similar model of some of the other programs we have at DCA, where we're expecting a builder to come in with maybe 10% builder equity and 50% financing from a local lender, and then the other 40% to come from us. And our intent is to offer interest rates that are either all going to be around 0% or up to 3%. We're giving ourselves a little flexibility there in case so that we are able to maybe ask for more interest on the loans if we needed, but our intent is to make this money as cheap as possible for people to access, so that if they're going after a conventional loan at 8% and we're giving them a loan for 0%, it ends up looking like a 4% loan. Does that make sense? So that's the plan. We're also going to be financing this through their lenders. So, and we'll get to some of the mechanics of this later, so I'll leave that off, but I'll just say for now that we do want to talk to communities first, and we would like for you to find your builders and find your lenders and put an application together that has elements from all three of those parties, and submit it to us. Well, I'm not going to go into details about where it's submission because now I'm getting ahead of myself on the slide. But the last comment on here, though, is that we won't be accepting applications for under $250,000. If you do have small projects, we do have other resources that we might be able to bring to the table for you. So if $1 million project is too much for you to take on, that's totally okay. Talk to us anyway. We'll see if we can find you a solution through one of our CHIP grants or some other things that we have that we can offer through the state.
Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, our eligible applicants for the land infrastructure grant piece of it are going to be units of general purpose local government, city, counties, or a local, regional, or a state authority. For our construction loans, it's going to be communities should seek out private developers and local lenders to provide that 60% of matched funds. So private developers, including non-for-profits or community housing development organizations, are eligible to apply. A couple of things I want to mention when it comes to being eligible to receive funds is your local government applicants must comply with the audit report and grant certification requirements in the state code. Also, your local government must comply with all reporting, audits, and survey requirements. If you've received prior One Georgia Authority funds through any of our Equity or EDGE programs, you must resolve any outstanding audit and monitoring findings, and you need to be up to date on your current awards that you have out. This is something that we are going to look at in the pre-application piece. If you are not up to date on your state reporting, your audits, you're not up to date on old awards with us, we will not accept an application from you. So this is very important that as a community, you are aware of where you are. And so when you're working with developers or anyone about a housing development, you need to make sure you are up to date as a community. So any questions about that piece of it? Because if you have questions, we have a whole entire team that can work with you on making sure you're up to date on all your reporting. I just want to make sure everybody's clear. Audits, everything has to be up to date before you can apply. So anything you want to add, Sam?
No, I don't have anything to add about that.
Okay, you can go on to the next slide.
Yeah.
So eligible activities. Oh,
yeah, there you go.
So this initiative is to provide flexible funding to support several objectives. So this is where we're talking about defining what workforce housing is. So it's developments of affordable for-sale single-family housing with a sale price, not an initial listing price, but a sale price between $125,000 and $290,000. The development of single or multifamily rental housing with a per unit cost of between $125,000 to $290,000 for a 2 or more bedroom unit with affordable rents for at least 10 years. And there's an affordability definition there for you. Rural workforce housing funding, as we mentioned, can be layered with other public funds, but it is not intended to provide that gap financing for developments that are already financed. So if you've already got programs or projects or developments in your area that are already financed, we're not coming in to be that gap financing tool for you with this funding. The developments must comply with the state environmental and historic preservation requirements also in your area. So anything you want to add, Samantha?
Yeah, I do. So a couple of things on this. As far as gap financing goes, we are well aware that a lot of current projects that are being built are coming up short on their current costs. So if that's something that you're handling, please talk to us. We might be able to find something for you. Last year, we were able to finance a lot of our low-income housing tax credit projects that we had approved, that they were finding that the costs were coming up higher than what they had estimated. We were able to provide some financing. It may not be that we'll be able to do that in all cases, but we're really trying to make sure that these deals that are in the works can get built. But for this, we definitely want to be adding additional housing on top of what we already have in the pipeline with this. So we don't, like Jenna said, we don't want this to be gap financing on a current award. But I did want to offer that if that is the circumstance you have, we might be able to find a different solution through one of our other products. As far as the state environmental and historic preservation requirements are, I'd be happy to explain what those might be for this. For those of you who are familiar with federal financing, we have a lot of requirements that we have to meet for this. This won't be as stringent, but there are some concerns we want to make sure we address. We don't want to be building things in places that are going to be maybe like landfills and hazardous for people or in flood zones. And we certainly don't want to destroy historic property. So we're going to have a couple of things we'll be checking on with that. So if you have any questions, I'll be able to address that with you. If you have a particular project site where you might be worried it might have an environmental or historic preservation concern, please let us know. But the way this program is going to operate is you're going to have a lot of opportunities to engage with us as you're moving along and planning your process, and we'll be able to address these as they go along.
So Samantha, George had a question and said, is this median household income or an individual, the 30%? Do you want to take that or do you want me to take it?
That's household income.
We are not going to be qualifying individuals when it comes to this program. So,
yeah.
Okay. So I want to talk to you a little bit about the application process and how this is going to work. So on both sides of this, we have a joint initial project assessment that we're asking you all to submit. We ask that that be submitted at least 2 weeks prior to the deadline so that our team has time to review that and provide feedback. The way the process will work, it's the initial project assessment is submitted via email. It's available on our website, and our regional team can also provide you links to that as well. But we will receive those initial project assessments. Sam's team and my team, we will work together to review those initial project assessments and determine, is this something that the One Georgia Authority team will work on or Sam's team will work on? And it may be both. There will be separate applications that you will apply for the infrastructure piece or the construction financing piece. So based upon the receipt of that initial project assessment, we will provide feedback to all of our communities about what will be necessary to submit with your full application. Then you'll be given the link to your to the full application process. We will also provide site visits to each project that we're looking at injecting funds into. We'll provide technical assistance for those full applications. And then after the full applications are submitted, the deadlines are released in the NOFA as well. They're also available on our website. They're the second Friday of the months of July, October, January, and April. So they're due then, and then usually it takes about 3 months before we can award those. So the applications that were received July 14th will be a deadline. We have our first deadline that's coming up. The One Georgia Authority will meet in September, and after that authority meeting, we will announce awards at that point on the infrastructure piece of it. So I will let Sam talk to you a little bit about the construction loan application piece, because her cycle will run differently than the infrastructure piece.
Right. So the difference there is that we won't have the One Georgia Authority voting on it, so we don't have a quarterly deadline. So you all are welcome to submit your applications when you have projects available. We also want to be very responsive to people's project timelines. So it's hard to do a development project when you have an annual deadline for applications. Better to be able to provide the financing as things come up. So we're going to do it as a rolling basis. After that first $10 million is put out there, then we'll have a pause on accepting applications. We'll still talk to y'all, and then we'll wait for that financing to get paid back. This is quick financing. This is just construction loans. So we're hoping that people can build the housing they want to build within a year and then be able to pay that back and get it back into the revolving fund. What we're going to be looking for is the project cost reasonable? Does the budget make sense? Does the project team have experience doing a project like this before? What kind of other financing are they bringing to the table? Because remember, we're not financing the whole deal. And certainly we're going to be looking at those developments that don't need 40% financing for us, maybe that just need a little bit. And then the development objectives, we want to see how this and how these neighborhoods might fit into the larger objectives for neighborhood revitalization, let's say, or just building more housing because you have workforce that are now, new jobs that are coming in and you don't have housing to match it. And then the last note that says that the authority will delegate underwriting responsibility to the senior lender when practical. This is going to be a great way for us to get this money out quickly. What we're going to do is really work with the lender on the deal. So, the concept here is that a community will identify somewhere where they want to build. They'll find the builder. We'll talk to the lender. And then when we give out the loan, we'll actually give the loan to the lender. And then they'll go ahead and pay out to the builder. And that helps us to be able to get the money out to a variety of different locations around the state and not have to have that specific oversight when the builders send us, they don't have to send us a payment request and then have us pay through our system. We're hoping that the banks can set up a line of credit or however they would normally do their construction lending, and our financing will just be put into that mix. So it's a new thing that we're trying here. We do have similar programs with SSBCI, but this okay, so I'm going to move on. Do you have anything else you want to add, Tina?
No, I'm good.
Okay.
Fun.
Hold on, let me mute. We've got some new people join. Okay. So as I mentioned earlier, our application deadlines are going to be July 14th, October 13th, January 12th, and April 12th for the upcoming year, or unless all funds are expended before that time frame. If we have 25.7 and we get it done before April, we won't have a deadline then unless the state legislature decides to give us more funds for this program. There is a link to our applications. All full applications must be submitted online. As I mentioned, our initial project assessment that's submitted via email, it is, I've shared the link to our website within the chat already, so you can go straight there to find the resources for the, you can actually download a copy of the full application, but that can only be submitted online through this link that's here. As we mentioned, that the construction loans will be on a rolling cycle, but our infrastructure grants will be on a quarterly basis along with all of our typical equity and rural innovation programs. The expected completion timeframe for all the funds to be expended are 2 years. We like to see our awards within 2 years be closed out for these awards. So anything else you want to add there, Sam?
No, I don't have anything to add here. Just move it along.
Okay. So a little bit about a couple of questions we want you to ask yourself to determine if your community is actually ready to apply for these Rural Workforce Housing Initiative funds. So you need to, as I mentioned earlier, are you compliant with state reporting? That's the first question. And if you aren't, you need to figure out what it is you need to do to make sure you are compliant so that you can then apply. Do you have a housing needs assessment? It's not something that we actually require, but we would like to see. There's going to be a lot of information that is required in the application. So having that housing needs assessment will allow you to answer a lot of those questions and be more ready to apply and get these projects completed in the 2-year time frame. Some resources to consider are Housing Market Study Guide, the Georgia Initiative for Community Housing, which is our GIC program. We have a lot of those active communities across the state and active alumni communities across the state. And looking at your comprehensive plan and specifically the housing section of that, what has your community decided that you need to focus on in terms of housing in your area? So Samantha, you want to add anything to that?
Right. I just want to reiterate that as a state agency, when we're looking at investing these resources into communities around the state, we need to make sure we can justify there's a real need, right? I mean, we already have established there is a need broadly across the state, but we want you to tell us what the need is, what kind of housing, where does it make the most sense to build it? And when I say what kind, I mean, are we talking rental, home ownership? What size? Are you talking about single family homes or duplexes or garden apartments or what have you? So we want you to come to us with your housing development plan, justify that there is a need, and that will help us be able to say, yes, this is definitely a worthwhile investment of state resources into your community instead of maybe another community. And we do have these, we do want to help you all. If you haven't done a housing needs assessment, that isn't a problem. And we do have a lot of resources. And if you haven't, you may want to consider it because housing is becoming a more critical issue all over the state. So you may want to look into how your community is growing and how you're going to meet that demand. The Housing Market Study Guide link. And what I'm going to do after this is I'm sending you out a survey, but I'm also going to send you these presentation slides so that you can use all the links that are in here. The link is to the housing market study that we provide to developers that are applying for the low-income housing tax credit program. So it's probably more than you need, but it's a good starting point for you to consider, like, okay, well, what do I need to look at for, vacancy rates if you're looking at rental, other kind of data set elements. There's some instructions about how to access those. We don't want people to have to hire consultants if it's at all possible to avoid that. We want you to be able to put this stuff together cheaply and easily and be able to access our resources and lean on us if you need any help for that.
All right, so first steps. Do you have a plan for developing land for workforce housing, and do you need the financing from the state to complete the plan? As we've mentioned, we're not coming in to be that gap financing tool for projects that are already happening. There's other programs that we have across DCA that might be able to assist there. But this is for new workforce housing across the state of Georgia. We want to work with communities that are ready. So check your compliance. And then after you've checked your compliance across the state, different audits and reporting requirements, we want you to schedule a meeting with your local DCA regional rep. If you do not know your DCA regional rep, please reach out to me. I was one prior to coming over to the One Georgia Authority, so I'm happy to connect you with who your regional rep is. And what that meeting is about is for them to help you determine, is your community ready? And then they work with Sam and I and our teams to determine, is this going to be a potential development that is going to help and fit into the eligible activities? Are they an eligible applicant? That type thing, because we do not want to waste any community's time if you're not ready to apply. And then after that meeting with the DCA regional rep, you can then fill out the initial project assessment to satisfy those baseline eligibility requirements. We'll provide that technical assistance back to you so that then you can complete the full application. And then the full application will be reviewed and scored by our internal team and then given to the One Georgia Authority Board for recommendation of approval or denial of those applications that are submitted. So anything you want to add to that, Samantha?
I know that we set up this first steps with One Georgia's land development grant in mind, but the same steps apply for the housing loans too, right? So talk to us, we'll kind of look at your initial plans, decide what kind of documentation might be necessary on top of what we already have in the application, and then proceed to finance this with you. Let me move on to the next one. And then, so now we're at the end. So we have questions. I know we have some questions in the chat. Do you want me to go ahead and read them?
Sure.
We can answer them. Okay. All right. So let me just go up and see what's come in. Okay. All right. So after addressing the question about the income, all right, so
I'm going to go ahead and take George's if you don't mind. He talked about it. He wanted an example of a type of development. So if you don't mind, I'll share the one that we just shared on Friday about Stevens County. Are you good with that?
Okay. Yeah,
okay.
That's great. Yeah.
All right. So at the Georgia Economic Developers Association on Friday, we had a panel that talked about this rural workforce housing initiative, and Samantha, she was gracious enough to serve on that panel with Commissioner Nunn, and then we had an individual from Georgia Power, but we also had a community representative from Stevens County. Her name is Brittany Ivy. Myself and Deputy Commissioner Haygood went up there on Wednesday to look at this development that has a potential application that will be coming in to sort of get an idea. To give you an example so Stevens County is located, up in North Georgia. There's a lot of development of major businesses around Stevens County, some in Stevens County, but they've really had a lot of announcements around their area, but they have a need for workforce housing, as does much as the state of Georgia. But a developer came to them and they have a plan to build some multifamily housing and some single family housing. They needed some help with the infrastructure. They already have water and sewer there, and they already have the roads there, but they actually need the guts to the sewer system. There's about a $250,000 need there. The city is going to inject $125,000. The county is going to inject $125,000, and they're coming to apply to us for $250,000 to assist with that infrastructure need. It's necessary to make the development actually occur, and the community can't take on the full cost of that. So that's an example of one of the type of infrastructure grants we're looking at. And it's probably going to build, we're thinking, she's got to get me an exact number, probably around 80 units with this one little infrastructure grant that we'll have. The rental income, the rental cost for that fits into our need of that gap of workforce housing. So it's a good project. We're excited to look at it, but that's just one example of a project where we can come in and interject possibly interject some of those infrastructure funds. So
yeah, thanks for that example. One thing that I'm going to focus on for you all is coming up with a good guide for examples where communities have come together and put together neighborhoods. That way you all can talk to people, take a look at some photos. I'm really interested in seeing some new designs that might come out of this. And that way you'll have a lot of resources. Hopefully within this first year, we'll have a good resource base for the next year of financing. Okay, so one of the questions we have is, can the housing requirement be used to develop downtown housing such as lofts? And yes, as a matter of fact, one thing we are excited about this is that we would like to partner with the Georgia Downtown Development and Main Streets programs to see how we might be able to fit this financing in with other downtown resources. I'm thinking particularly about historic preservation to update maybe the upstairs of a retail downtown area. What's exciting about not having this be income restricted is that you can get households in here that, I mean, I could see this could be ideal for young adults who want to just live upstairs before they have kids and be able to go down the coffee shop during the day and go out to eat downtown. So this might be a great tool for downtown development to put housing above the retail. So please talk to us about it, or talk to Jessica Worthington and her team if you're already connected with them, because we have been talking about with them about how we can partner up some of this financing. Oh, what is the URL for our website?
I posted it in there. I posted it in there.
You did already? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, you got it. Great. I just had to scroll down. Is the purpose of this program to provide an incentive to build workforce housing in areas where there isn't a demand? It seems if there was a demand for workforce housing, the developers and builders would already be building there. That, Dave, is the mystery of the day. Why is it that there's such a gigantic demand for housing and you can make so much money off of it right now, and people are not building it? It's obviously a supply and demand problem, right? The problem is also on the supply side too. There's a lot of reasons for this, but there just aren't as many builders that we need. That's part of the reason why we're having trouble catching up. Financing is expensive. We have a reduced labor market. Also, you know, and this is something that you all really need to think about and talk to your local government officials. Sometimes government regulations can really be a big barrier to building, whether it's because of the design standards or the zoning and ordinances are prohibitive, or just the time that it takes. COVID has really, now we're all kind of getting back to business as usual, but during the last couple of years, it's been tough to get permits when offices were closed or what have you, you know. So, I mean, there's just been a real problem within the entire structure of the housing market that has created this problem that we're in now. I'm very concerned, and this is sort of separate from this, but it's something to consider locally, with the lack of builders and people working in the construction trades. I was talking to someone recently who's on the Georgia Home Builders Association, who's in South Georgia, and he said the plumber that he uses is 70 years old. So, you know, that the impact that we have on a lot of different industries that we're seeing, where there's just fewer people who are in the younger workforce, that's impacting construction in a huge way. So we're finding that jobs are taking longer because it's harder to line up those subcontractors, or you're trying to get subcontractors to come down to a site from a different location and having to pay for their lodging. That's bringing construction costs up. So there's a lot of factors involved that are making it hard. What we're trying to do here, the power that we have to try to impact this is financing, trying to make the money cheaper to access, and also trying to work on the government regulation side to kind of advise local governments to consider things that might make things easier for the construction to happen. Those are the two roles I think the state can really play to impact this problem that we're seeing. And we're seeing it all over the country too. We just have not caught up since 2008, and it's really starting to bear down on us. Okay, let's see, other questions. So Corin, thank you very much. You added the region reps. So there's a link in there to find your regional reps if you don't know who that person is. Okay, so Greg asked, how detailed does the plan for developing land need to be before the IPA? Is this just a community that has identified land and infrastructure needs, or do we already need to have committed developers for an infrastructure grant?
So the IPA asks you to name your developer. It asks you to name your primary financial institution that's working with that developer. It's asking you to identify the parcels or the addresses that are going to be developed. the type of proposed projects, number of units. So, and I think this kind of answers a little bit of Kim Hobbs's question. This is the next one. Is there a timeline, when you're assuming that the grant application has a developer that's committed? We really do want that developer committed. We don't really want to just have a lot of pipe farms around the state that's ready for workforce housing. We really, in this initial subset of funds, it sounds like a lot of money, but when you're really talking about developing workforce housing across the entire state, $35.7 million is not a lot of money. And so we're really looking to fund projects that are really shovel ready. They're ready to go, to work and have that developer in hand. So we will be looking at that in the scoring piece of that. So not just laying the water or the sewer getting ready for potential development, but having that developer who says, once that water and sewer's there, I'm ready to start building housing so we can meet that need. Does that answer y'all's question? I hope a little bit. Samantha, you might want to add something to that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so the next question is, if we filed an extension for our FYE 2020 audit, would we still be eligible to apply? And then it said the audit will be completed June 30th of 2023.
So you can submit, you are eligible to apply. You would have to submit where that extension has been granted by DOAA to us in the application. And before any funds could be awarded, you would have to be compliant. So if the audit's going to be complete by June 30th of 2023, that's just, a month away. By the time the application would actually be due, it would be July 14th. So that should be handled. But we'll look at those on a case-by-case basis. But before any funds could be drawn down to a community, that would have to be rectified. So.
Mm-hmm. The next question is, with these monies, will city ordinances and design standards be followed, or are they exempt? We're not going to supersede any local design standards or ordinances or zoning. So whatever proposal comes in really needs to match up with the community desire for what kind of housing to build. When I was talking earlier about steps that local governments can take, what I meant by that was take a look at your design standards, see if they're appropriate. Like one thing that I know has changed over the years is there are fewer families who are as interested in having a big lawn, for instance, to maintain. So you may want to think like, would it be acceptable nowadays to put in some townhouses and duplexes and things? Would that be something that our community would like? Whatever you build, though, really needs to be able to pass the test of the neighbors around the neighborhood that you're trying to build, right? Because you don't want to put stuff into place only to find out that you're going to get a lot of pushback from the community because it isn't something that they are going to like to live next door to. So every community really needs to come up with what are the design standards that make sense for you? What are those zoning and ordinances requirements that make sense for your community, that fit your community personality? And then make sure that you are also thinking about updating them because they might be old. I mean, also, I think sometimes with design standards, while I, for one, really love brick, I think it looks beautiful. It is more expensive. It does add to the cost. So if you think there are some places where you can think about it and have those kind of conversations, and I think also thinking not so much about how big the lot has to be or what kind of siding it is, but also the timing, like your process steps for from the beginning, started when you start talking to the planning and zoning department to when you actually complete the housing. Are there some steps that you might be taking that are causing more time on a project? Because time is money, right? It takes longer. You've got people lined up who are, you've had to buy your supplies ahead of time and that sort of stuff. There are some things that we can do to try to make the housing easier and cheaper to build in those ways, faster. All right, so but we're not going to say the state has these design standards you need to follow. We're going to be looking to you all to decide for your communities. Okay, here's a question: can a developer apply for the loan portion if there is no need for the infrastructure grant? Yes, absolutely. You can apply for the grant without the loan. You can apply for the loan without the grant, or you can apply for both. And then another question for me, the 60% construction financing, is that for the infrastructure only, or are you funding the housing? That was just for housing. So when we talk about the loan and the financing, we just mean for that 10 million that we're making available for construction financing. That doesn't apply to the infrastructure grant. In fact, we don't have a match requirement on the infrastructure grant. We're just, we do want to see leverage other resources, but we're not making it required. Did you want to add anything to that, Jenna?
Nope.
About the infrastructure financing?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, another question. Is there a timeline to build the houses after the infrastructure is in place, like 2 years, 5 years? I think you touched on that earlier, Jenna, and yeah, we want you to start right away. We certainly do not want to delay construction. What would be ideal is if you already have, like, once the infrastructure is in place, you have someone lined up to build right away. That would be ideal. I realize that, that sometimes you might have that plan and it doesn't work out and there's a little bit of a delay, but we're really trying not to put this money out there for it to sit as a pipe farm, as Jenna mentioned. We want there to be a plan in place that, like, once infrastructure's there, the housing can be built like the very next day. That would be ideal. And we certainly would not fund it if you didn't have some plan for making it go. We want to be making a very quick impact with this money. So if you just want to, like, secure the land and get something started, but you don't really have any concrete plans for what's going to go on it, that's not going to get funded. Do you have any other comments about that, Jenna?
Nope, you covered it.
Okay, so the 2 years starts when you draw the construction loan. Well, yeah, I mean, we apply the 2 years to both the infrastructure and the construction loan, but our hope is that the construction portion will go pretty quickly. It usually takes about 6 months to build a house, and then depending on how big this project is, you might have some houses finished and selling, and then moving on to other phases of the development. So I could see that stretching out. But we don't want to be put in a position of granting the funds and then nothing happens. 2 years should be enough. Not every community has can move as quickly as we would like. 2 years should be enough time to get your financing together, to have your plans reviewed. And then we also, I should say, and this is kind of getting a little in the weeds, we're not going to award financing to a project that needs to get rezoned, for example, unless that seems like it's going to be pretty quick and easy to do. So we don't want to just have you sitting on the money and then taking several years to get the project done for it to be paid back. But ideally, what we want to finance, at least in this first year, what is projects that are ready to go, and all they need is that infusion of cash, and then those houses are going to sell really soon, and then we can roll that money into the next community. We have a lot of flexibility with this program, which is exciting, but we want to see this effective soon so we can learn from those and try to replicate them. And we don't want all the money to be tied up in projects for a long time without seeing those homeowners get their keys. We're really hoping that we can finance all this very quickly and start seeing some houses get built and some people in those within 2 years. All right, next question. What if our community needs a water plant and tower to accommodate with building these developments? Does that count as infrastructure?
If you can determine and provide information that says that that is what is needed to make housing developments occur, and you've got a developer in hand, it's something we can definitely have a conversation about. It's not ineligible.
Yeah.
But it would need to do, in my mind, I'm thinking an entire water plant, a tower, that's going to serve more of a need than just housing. So that was something we'd have to look on a case-by-case basis. I would encourage you to submit initial project assessment and allow us to get a little more information and provide some more feedback on that. So.
Okay, so another question. So there's no deadline, just the sooner the better on the home construction. Yes, absolutely. Mm-hmm. That is the message. Here's another question. If it takes a year to get the sewer to the site and you can't start building until it's there, you'd be bumping on that 2 years pretty quick on that house. Does that make sense? It absolutely does make sense. And that's going to happen. A lot of our projects are taking longer. 2 years is not, we're not going to cut you off after 2 years and say, oh, it didn't get built, forget it. I mean, if you're making steady progress on a project and it's under construction or is about to be under construction, we'll take that under consideration for sure. So don't worry that that's the hindrance, because it could be a 3-year project and not a 2 years project. But we did want to give people a timeline to think about how their current process and what they're thinking about doing is going to fit in with having this financing available now, 2023 through 2025. Is our timeline.
I'll just sort of add to that. This funding is meant to be flexible. It is not going to be as stringent as federal funds for housing developments across the state. So just keep that in mind. our authority really tries to work with our communities. Our regional team comes out and does every 6 months is going to be doing site visits on these projects that we award. So constant communication, you're required to do, reporting to us every 6 months. So there will be constant conversations. So if there are already issues, we'll be able to address those or have those conversations. So.
So that's the last of the questions in the chat. I think we can go ahead and open this up for an open conversation for the rest of this if you want. If anybody wants to chime in or keep typing in, well, I'll read them off too. Oh, Greg, thanks for putting that tool for housing data on analysis online. That's really helpful. I'm very excited about this program for a number of reasons. I already mentioned that it's new territory from our division to be working outside of just low-income housing and being able to provide something to people who are more in that middle income range. That's one thing. Also, this is a program that we're designing by Georgia for Georgia. So it's going to be great to see some innovation coming from you all. And certainly we're open to suggestions about how to make this more efficient, more effective, so that we can build something that's going to maybe stay with us past this first grant cycle. We do have the financing secured for this, and we are going to be doing a lot of it as grants. Some of it's revolving in the loan fund, but if we're really successful with this and this works, we may be able to convince the legislator to fund it again. Part of the impetus for this particular project design is formulated by similar programs here in Georgia, but we also were inspired by Nebraska, which did something similar a few years ago. And their legislature likes it so much they've funded it 3 times now. That's the program where we came up with their idea that Nebraska saw a need to just build inventory. So, we've always worked under the mindset that this is a beneficiary program. We're trying to benefit households that aren't really financially able to be in the marketplace, and they need a little subsidy in order to afford to live in housing. And what Nebraska said is, that's fine. We do still want to do that, but we just need more inventory. We just need more houses for everyone. And so we kind of took that to heart in drafting our plan for this one too.
Well, if y'all have any questions that you think of, our contact information is available here. You can find our information also on the DCA website. So feel free to send us emails, give us a phone call. We'll talk through potential projects that are in your communities, and we want to be a partner as we focus on that need for rural workforce housing across the state of Georgia. So thank y'all so much for being our guinea pigs and our first people that we got to talk to about it too. So
yeah. Yeah, and as a follow-up, I will be sending you all and all the other people who registered. So if you have coworkers that had tried to come to this and had other scheduling conflicts, they'll get an email from me too if they registered. It'll have the slide deck and some contact information again, so you'll have it right there. And then I also, if you would please fill out a short survey. So if you are already thinking about this, let us know what you're planning so we can start the conversation now. Your regions will get the first attention if you send it to us first. We have 2 scheduled for the 31st, and I don't know specifically which regions those are. Jen, I'm sure you probably don't either.
I think it's 12, 1, 2, 3, and 5, I believe.
Yeah. And then we have one last one for the remaining ones. I think that's June 3rd. So within the next 2 weeks, we're really hoping to talk to you all directly. Please get back to us, share your ideas, and please share these with your colleagues. And, feel free to forward along that email I send with all this follow-up information. Because one thing I am concerned about, because it's a new program and because the financing is limited, I really don't want us to be in a position where people find out next year, oh, I didn't know I could apply, so we really need your help to get the word out too. Okay, should we wrap it up?
Thank y'all.
All right. Well, thank you all so much for your time, and we look forward to hearing from you.
Have a good rest of the week, guys.
Thank you.